Hey everybody, hope you're doing great. Welcome to the morning Devo with Bo O, and it is a special day. It's actually Good Friday today, so we are having a service at Calvary Christian Fellowship at 6:30 this evening. Very excited about that, and just to contemplate the death of Jesus Christ, which we just got done talking about yesterday a little bit about Jesus dying on the cross and what that meant, and the relationship that we have now with God because of what Jesus Christ has done with us or done for us, as opposed to what a relationship was like with God apart from the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. And that's really what Paul's talking about. In this book of Galatians, it's kind of a incredible Bible study that Paul is doing, and you got to remember that when we go through these books, a lot of them are Bible studies that the writer is giving to his audience. And the Bible that they had was the Old Testament. So they're going over the Old Testament passages and trying to help you understand what Christ has done through looking at people like Abraham. And so that's what we've been looking at. Now, Paul says something really kind of cute in Galatians chapter 4, and that's where we pick things up in our time of Devo. So it says, think of it this way, and that's what I find is so cute. I love the New Living Translation. Another translations that might say, "This is what I am saying." The New Living Translation starts it off, think of it this way. So he's trying to help the churches in Galatia understand this idea of being saved by grace through faith, that is a biblical concept, Old Testament Bible concept. Yeah, that's not a New Testament concept, that is a Old Testament concept of being saved by faith. So this should totally throw out all those interesting ideas on Discovery Channel about Christianity that say, oh, Christianity started 2,000 years ago with a band of, a motley crew of disciples around this Jewish mystic rabbi, and wrong, right? Nope, Christianity didn't start 2,000 years ago. No, the idea of being saved by grace through faith is all the way back in Genesis. That's a lot longer than 2,000 years ago, friends. So, but then again, yeah, I understand it though, because I remember when I was raised, I wasn't raised like in a born again Christian family. And when you're not raised like that, you start saying things that you really don't know anything about. So I understand, sometimes those Discovery Channel producers and things of that nature just aren't on the page. But Paul here makes his case again. Think of it this way. He's going through the Bible. What Bible? The Old Testament, right? So obviously to Paul, salvation by grace was something that was spoken about years ago, and Paul keeps going back to the book of Genesis. Now, he says it this way. Think of it this way. If a father dies and leaves an inheritance for his young children, those children are not much better off than employees, basically, slaves, the idea of employees, until they grow up, even though they actually own everything that their father had. So sometimes when the New Testament's writing, when it says slaves, we think of slavery much different from what they're talking about. So it could be someone who's actually like employed by someone, working for someone. The children have the same kind of rights or rules as someone who's a hired hand. They're not able to receive the inheritance, just like a hired hand isn't able to just dip his hands into the money, right? The inheritance money. Yeah. So, and then it says they have to obey their guardians until they reach whatever age their father set. And that's the way it was with us before Christ came. We were like children. We were slaves to the basic spiritual principles of this world. We moved in this role relationship with the world, just in its basic principles. It could be also translated powers of this world. We were like children, we were like slaves to this basic world system. We just did what it did. Different principles that are just in our daily lives. You do this, this happens, cause and effect, that kind of stuff. Um, and that's what it's saying. Before Christ came, we had this relationship, this role. Now, Paul's obviously thinking this role relationship we had with the law. That's what he's been talking about, the law of Moses. And we had, even if you didn't know the law of Moses, like I didn't know the law of Moses, you still worked off a premise of laws, if that makes sense to you. Like, even though I wasn't raised around the Old Testament Torah and I didn't know the Ten Commandments, I was still working in my life, doing things, basing my behaviors off basic principles that I was taught or that were functioning on the planet. And that's what Paul is saying. It says, before Christ came, before we had this new relationship with the Father through Jesus Christ, we were all working within this basic principles of the world. So that's how our roles were, um, you know, with the world. We were just functioning in this basic principle of it. It says, but when the right time came, God sent his Son, born of a woman, subject to the law. So Jesus was subject to the law. God sent him to buy freedom for us who were slaves to the law. So what did Jesus come to do? To buy freedom for us who were slaves to the law, so that he could adopt us as his very own children. Now, obviously, this Paul's already talked about this is Jesus dying for us on the cross, and his blood being shed for our sins. But I love kind of the verbiage here. It says, God sent his Son, born of a woman, subject to the law. And it's wonderful just to remember that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. And Jesus had to go through just what we go through. And doesn't that help you even today, this morning, is that Jesus, knows what you go through. He became a man and suffered and went through all those things that we go through. He was subject to the law. He put himself underneath that law, right, of the Torah. And he fulfilled the law perfectly. But yet he subjected himself to the unlawful principles of mankind who is working in this world. We were obeying the principles of this world, doing things that we've been taught to do. And what did we show Jesus when he came on the scene? We showed hostility, right? Right, envy, strife, lust for power, greed, prejudice. Every form of evil just came out of us, as seen in the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And when you look at the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, you should see just the amount of injustice that is in us, that when we are in our basic principles of this world, we are slaves to the basic principles of this world. We are bound to it. And when we are visited by God, we don't do too good, do we? Those basic principles that we are a slave to. And Jesus, remember, says, if you sin, you are a slave to it. And we are bound to it. That sin in us, when Jesus was on the scene, came out in all that injustice that we see in the work of the cross, right? There's some great songs I was just thinking about in my brain. I was thinking of some cool worship songs and things about Jesus dying on the cross, and you might want to ponder those today as you just remember the death of Jesus Christ. But God sent his Son. Even that is just beautiful, right? God sent his Son. That's the John 3:16. Born of a woman, right? Just like us. Subject to the law. He can relate to us. He knows what it's like to come on this earth And it says, God sent him to buy freedom for us who were slaves to the law so that he could adopt us as his very own children. So what is this about? A different role, right? That's what it sounds like. A different role relationship. That there could be a different relationship that the Father has with us. Instead of us being in hostility. Ooh, I almost sneezed. That was so close. That was so close. All of a sudden it just, whoom, came on me. Um, but what was I saying? This different role relationship, right? That just as we we have this hostility with God because we are bound to the basic principles of this world, slaves to it. Jesus came to buy us, give us a new relationship. Now, think of it this way, and I kind of think of it sometimes this way, is when I have a hired hand come to the house, right? They can't just come into the house and like get in the refrigerator and grab a soda or something. Not that I have soda in the fridge, but you get the idea. It's a hired hand. They're living by a set of laws based off of a contract with me and with their employer. And so they can't just come into your house and do what they want to do. But my son could just walk right in. My daughter, come right in. They have a different relationship. Well, because of our sin, we couldn't just come into the home. Our sin put us into a contract. The law showed us was the contract. The law was that contract that said, you need to do this in order to dwell, in order to be in the house. In order to be in the house, you have to do these things. You have to obey these things. And that law was set up, Paul's saying, to show you that the contract, according to the law, will never get you in that house. You're always going to find failure with that contract. And the problem's not with the contract. It's just showing the perfect character of God in the commandments. But what the problem is your inability to hold up your end of the contract. And so you can't get in that house. So there needs to be a new relationship formed. And this is one that's done through adoption. You've been adopted in. So you're not the only begotten. You're never going to be like Jesus. You're not going to be the only begotten of God. That is Jesus. Jesus is the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. But you are adopted. And some people look at that and they go, oh, that doesn't sound too good. But man, adoption? You've been chosen. In the ancient world, if you were an adopted kid, man, you were picked and you were chosen by your family. And that was a super duper prestigious place to be in. So, yeah, I mean, even sometimes more than a biologically born child. And you go, well, why would they do that? Well, because you were chosen. You were handpicked by the Father. And so it says that this is why Jesus came, was to do away with the old contract so that we can now be adopted in. The old contract's done. It's been fulfilled. Jesus obeyed all the law. He's the one who did it. And so now we can be adopted in through him, as he enters the house, because he did it perfectly. Now we can follow him. And this is so true, right? If my son comes in the house and he goes, oh, my friends are coming over, Trey and Bob, are coming down to the house. When Trey and Bob get there, they literally can come right in. Why? Because they're friends of the Son. So isn't that cool? You can be a friend of the Son, and that's how you get into the house. Why can Trey and Bob get in my refrigerator? Because they're friends of my Son. Why can Bob and Trey roam around the house, hang out, sit on the couch, put on the television, jump in the pool, go on, whatever they want to do, I'm cool with it. Why? Because they're friends with the Son. And I love my son. And my son has a relationship with me. And it's through that relationship that the other ones are accepted into the family. So I'm hoping you grab some of that. That's, I know it's that's some teaching thing, but I hope you just can kind of realize that, man, that's kind of cool. I mean, Jesus is the only begotten, and I get to just come on in the home because I'm friends with the Son. And it always leads me to a question, man. Are you a friend of the Son? You know, are you a friend of the Son? Yeah. So, and it says, and because we are his children, God has sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts. Okay, so because we are friends of the Son, we are his children. God has sent his Spirit of his Son into our hearts, prompting us to call out, Abba, Father. Now, it's so cool, but I just keep thinking of my own son. When a son has a friend that's always over to the house, the Spirit of my son is now upon that other person. Does that make sense? That Spirit of my son is now in that other kid, because that kid's always with my son. So when that kid comes over, now check this out. Now my son doesn't even have to come into the house. He doesn't have to be even home. If I know that other kid is coming over, he can come on in. He could get in the refrigerator. He could sit down. Why? Because the Spirit of my son is in that kid. See, that relationship is so close between him and my son. I now look at that kid as a child of mine. And so now I think of that kid as a child of mine. And that's how Paul's talking this way, And because we are his children, we are the Father's children, God has sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, prompting us to call out what? Abba, Father. How do you know you're a Christian? Because just as Jesus called out, Father, forgive them, just as he said, Father, so you too see his Father as your Father. That's right. Just as that my son's friend sees me as a dad. He sees me as, in a sense, his dad. And he might not call me dad per se in our culture, but he has the affection for me as a father. And I've been really fortunate to have a lot of, if you will, adopted kids as a minister, and so many adopted sons, so many adopted daughters, that me and my wife look at these people as kids, as part of our family. And so mi casa su casa. I mean, what I have is yours. That can't happen with someone who's working on my roof that I'm paying. That can't happen in that kind of a role. That person can't just come into the house. But all those other people, because of their association with my kids, and that of that nature, man, they're all a part of our lives, and that is so cool. And so how do you know? Are you crying out, Abba, Father? Is that how you look at God? Abba, Father, Daddy. Hey, Dad. Is that your idea of God? I think it was A.W. Tozer said, the most important thing in your mind, one of the things is what first comes into your mind when you think of God. So when you think of God, what comes into your mind? And that's a good point that A.W. Tozer, the author, makes. Is that what comes in? Do you see it as Daddy, Father, or do you see it as something else? And now this is how the Bible reveals God. God is spirit, but this is how God reveals himself as a father. Jesus said, "Our Father." Right? Jesus didn't say, let's go to God and call him Jehovah. as Jehovah Witnesses teach. That's not what Jesus said. Jesus said, our Father, right? Yeah, it's not that Yahweh, Jehovah, isn't the covenant name of God that of what we know of in the Old Testament, but what my point is that do you have a father relationship? Are you calling him Father? Do you see why Jesus used the term Father and not Jehovah or Yahweh? Because he wants you to have a relationship with God, who is spirit, like a awesome kid father relationship. Someone you adore, someone you care about, someone that can help you, someone can be there for you. And some of us, you might grow up and go, well, I never had that, Bo. Well, hey, you know what? A lot of people don't. But that's what Jesus is telling us that God is for us. That he is that one, that protector, that one who is a safe place to go to. If you sin and you bail in your sin, don't draw away from God. He is safe. You can draw to him. He is your daddy father. He is perfect. See, a lot of us think we're going to get spanked, that you go to God and you're going to get whipped. And he's going to spank you a little bit. And then after you get spanking, then you can cry a little bit in your room. And then finally you can go out and you're okay now because you just got spanked. Well, that's not how God is. God's not going to spank you. He's your father. He loves you. It doesn't mean he doesn't discipline you, but his discipline's good for us. He loves you. And it's motivated out of love. So it's never a harsh treatment of us. He's working out his perfect holiness plan within us to transform us into the image of Christ, the Bible says. So Jesus says, call it Father. And hey, are you saying Daddy, Father? Now you are no longer a slave, but you are God's own child, right? That kid who I never knew at one point, who couldn't come into my house, now has become like a son, right? Like a daughter. And since you are his child, God has made you his heir. Now check this out. I remember when I was making out a will, I put down the people on our will, and one of the people me and Sylvia put on our will was someone who's not even a part of my biological family. But they are one of these people that we have, in a sense, brought in. They are just as much a part of our family and an inheritor of what we have. Yeah, isn't that cool? That's right. And since you are his child, God has made you an heir. Through the kids, that person becomes an heir. And through the son, that person becomes an heir. They become like family. They are family. Yeah. Isn't that cool how that works? Man, that's so neat how that happens. So I hope that helps you. Just when you see Jesus on the cross, you say, wow, God sent his son, born of a woman, subject to the law, to what? Buy freedom for us who had this contract relationship with the Father. Now we have a family relationship with the Father, so we can cry out, Abba, Father. So I hope your Good Friday is one of awesome thinking about our Lord. So you guys take care, okay? Have a good one, and we will catch you, Lord willing, Monday. Okay, bye-bye.